Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. The role of the Transportation Trust is to oversee the surtax, that's the half-penny sales tax dedicated for transportation, and to oversee the implementation of the associated People's Transportation Plan. My responsibilities as Executive Director is to oversee our staff. We have a staff of 8 currently that's charged with, again, oversight and implementation of the People's Transportation Plan, and to act as a liaison to our trust, our board members. We have a 15-member board composed of citizens from every part of Miami-Dade County. There is a nominating process, and then ultimately those members are appointed by each of the county commissioners, the mayor, and the Dade League of Cities. Sure, I'm an urban planner by trade. Actually started my career working for Senator Bob Graham in Washington, D.C. In his public affairs office. But I quickly began to miss Miami, miss the culture, miss the energy here, miss my family. And so I decided I'd return to Miami, but I wanted to do so in a capacity in which I could leave a lasting legacy and improve the city. And I stumbled upon this profession called urban planning, which aims to do precisely that. So I returned to Miami. I started working for the South Florida Regional Planning Council, then Miami-Dade County Planning Department, and City of Coral Gables Planning Department, the Miami Downtown Development Authority, where I became Deputy Director, back to City of Coral Gables in their Economic Development Department, and then ultimately here at the CITT. So urban planning is a rather broad profession, deals with anything from land use and zoning to economic development, affordable housing, and transportation. But I've always been fascinated and passionate about the transportation planning aspects of the profession, and I've worked in that throughout my life. So when this opportunity came up, I thought it was a perfect fit for both my background, my abilities, and my interests. And luckily, here I am today. Sure, so 15 years ago, a referendum was put to the voters of Miami-Dade County to increase the sales tax from 6.5% to 7%, that half penny. And that half penny was to go towards a variety of transportation improvements, both expansion of transit, purchasing new vehicles, both mover, bus, and metro rail, but also some roadway projects, free fares for seniors, and then ultimately veterans, and a variety of municipal programs. So for instance, all the trolleys that you now see in places like the city of Miami, Doral, Miami Beach, 27 cities in all, are all funded through this half penny sales tax. The expansion of metro rail to the airport, what we now call the Orange Line, was funded almost entirely by the half penny sales tax. And now we're looking to expand the system further into 6 areas of the county, we call the 6 corridors. And that will ultimately be funded in part by the sales tax as well. Well, we are an independent body, independent of the county commission, but clearly we have to work very closely with both them and the administration to get anything done. And so I've always had positive relationships with the county commission in prior roles at the Downtown Development Authority. And so I have some personal relationships with certain members and their staff, and I'm developing new ones as time progresses. It's critical that we have buy-in from the county commission and from the administration in everything we do. Otherwise, nothing will get done. One of the reasons I'm optimistic about the future of Miami is I see for the first time in a very long time that we have a great deal of consensus on the need for expanding transit, on the key corridors that have been identified. We all agree to those 6 corridors, and on the prioritization of the north and south corridors as the first step in implementing the plan. Most recently, the County Commission approved what we call a TIF, a Tax Increment Financing District, that will further help to finance these projects. And I think that's evidence of the fact that they believe in transit and they are committed to getting something done. One of the issues that we've experienced with the surtax is it clearly overpromised what could be funded by that half penny. And that derailed, I think, the efforts for a long time. A lot of good things were done with that half penny, but it was never enough to complete the expansion of the transit corridors. So we are now engaged in what we call PTP 2.0, which is looking at those same corridors, but identifying much more creative ways of financing those so that they can be developed, operated, and maintained. So that includes some monies from the half penny, It's going to include some dollars from the TIF districts. It's going to require, I'm sure, some special assessment districts in key places. That's essentially an additional tax along the corridor so that those properties that most benefit from the transit will help pay for it. It may include things like raising the gas tax. It's, of course, going to require some state participation and perhaps federal participation. And finally, municipal contributions. Many of these lines run through cities. Those cities are going to have to pony up. And they can use their share of the surtax dollars to do that. And, and this is done all over the country. We took a trip, a few years ago now, to Denver to see how they are financing and implementing a very similar plan. And they are doing it successfully. And what we learned there is there are a variety of financing options available. And it takes, a collection of those 5, 6 different financing tools to really get these things done. Sure, so there are 6 corridors overall. The Northeast Corridor, which would run parallel to US 1 as it heads towards Aventura. That's currently the Bright Line rail tracks, and it would run along those same tracks. You have the North Corridor that would run along 27th Avenue, so from the Metro Rail north to the Broward, Miami-Dade County line. You have the East-West Corridor that would run essentially parallel to 836 or Flagler Street. The exact alignment is being determined. The Kendall Corridor, which would take you out west along Kendall Drive. The South Corridor, again on US 1 from Dadeland south to Florida City. And the Beach Corridor from downtown Miami to the beach. So those are the 6 corridors. The TPO and the County Commission have formally adopted the South Corridor and the North Corridor as the priority corridors. That's not to say that if opportunities arise, the other corridors couldn't also advance as quickly or even more quickly. For instance, the Northeast Corridor is rather low-hanging fruit because the rails are already there. That's really just waiting, an agreement with Brightline to be able to use their tracks. Similarly, the Beach Corridor is something that if the City of Miami Beach were to come into alignment and find potential funding solutions to that, for instance, public-private partnerships, that might advance more quickly. But formally, the county has selected the North and the South.